Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunattu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Vidvishavahai Om Shanti 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 Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Yadvaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Right, so the format for the exam is as follows, but I'll also put it in the WhatsApp group so you can refer back to it there. I will send out two written tests. I'll send out two written tests, which you can do in your own time. And then there will be two oral tests or verbal tests, um, which will be a lecture format. Which means you have to, two lectures will be on two topics. One, you have to give one lecture here, of course, among ourselves. It won't be recorded on Zoom, so don't worry about that. It'll be among us. One lecture will be on the Purusharthas, and one will be on Svadharma. Okay, so two written tests, which you can do in your own time between now and the beginning of the year. There's no real time uh, date. But of course, if it gets into February, we'll have discussion. Between now and the new year, I know we've got a lot going on upcoming Christmas. The two lectures to be given also will be between now and the new year. You can let me know what upcoming Sunday, it'll be on a Sunday during this time, what upcoming Sunday works for you. Okay. And the two lectures, each lecture has to be a minimum of 15 minutes long. And the two topics are one will be in the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, and one will be on Svadharma. Okay. And during this time, while you're preparing for your lecture, you can always uh, contact me, and I will typically respond in a voice recording. If it's a complex question or requires a little more explanation, and I'll put all the answers, responses in the WhatsApp so everyone can listen and gain more information. All right. So last week's review, the two written tests will be based on last week's review and this week's review. So if you listen to the recordings and the videos for last week's review and this week's review, you'll have a pretty good grasp on the content that's going to be on the two written tests. As far as the Svadharma lecture, I think I gave an entire video on Svadharma. I will link it into WhatsApp so you can actually go there and listen to that video on Svadharma to prepare for your lecture. All right, let's get started with today's review. Feel free to interject at any moment today with questions you have. Oh, my apologies for last week's recording. I was trying to listen to it myself and The recording was terrible. My voice was completely, anyways, be that as it may. Feeling much better this week around, so all is well. All right, let's get to it. So, one thing we have to reiterate and make sure it's perfectly understood, because a lot of times you will hear in lectures on the Bhagavad Gita that the Bhagavad Gita recommends all types of processes for spiritual development, and it does. That is absolutely correct. Bhagavad Gita does recommend all types of processes for different types of people who want to achieve moksha, people who want to achieve self-realization. That's absolutely true. However, it is absolutely and abundantly clear that Krishna himself, in his recommendation to Arjuna, puts forth Bhakti Yoga as the recommendation that he gives in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. That is clear. Now we're going to go over that to see how crystal clear that is. Again, this doesn't mean that Krishna is not recommending numerous other processes, and we'll go over those briefly. But his recommendation, his final recommendation in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna is a process of Bhakti Yoga. Let's go through that. So first of all, in the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, remember the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is expressing his depression, his concern, his given up the desire to fight, and he's ready to simply walk away from the battlefield. That's the entire first chapter. Krishna does not get a word in the first chapter. In the beginning of the second chapter, Arjuna continues for the first 10 verses or so, explaining why, and he gives so many valid reasons why he should not go to war. He gives reasons based on karma. He gives reasons based on just pragmatic, personal, selfish desires, why it does not benefit him to go to war. He gives reasons based on Vedic teachings. He gives reasons based on social considerations, all kinds of reasons. And Krishna listens, and Krishna responds in the beginning of the second chapter. First thing Krishna does, the first response is that he uses Sankhya Yoga, the teachings of Sankhya, to firmly and definitively describe that there's a body and we inhabit the body as the soul. And there's a difference between the body and the soul. This is very, very important, why Krishna starts there. Because without this concept of Atma, Sharira, Atma means the soul, Sharira means body. Without this concept, the entire Bhagavad Gita rests. The entire Bhagavad Gita falls apart. This concept, stemming from Sankhya, is absolutely essential to everything that follows in the Bhagavad Gita. This idea that there's a body and a soul is separate from the body is a temporary, and the soul is eternal. This understanding starts with faith. There's no proof of this, right? Once we die, no one has ever come back from the dead. Well, there's Jesus Christ, but that's beside the point. No one has come back from the dead to verify that there is life after death. This is something that is taken completely on faith. And Krishna recognizes this, absolutely. But even though there's no scientific proof, one cannot prove in a scientific manner that there's life after death. This is still the beginning point Krishna uses upon which to build all of the philosophical content of the Bhagavad Gita. And then he gives or recommends to Arjuna, the reader, us, various processes for us to come to this realization, this Atmagyan, this self-realization that the soul is different from the body. But yes, it starts with one's first initial faith and acceptance, and then beginning a process. So what I'm getting at here is the very first process Krishna recommends comes in chapter 2, text 39. In chapter 2, text 39, Krishna mentions the very first process for self-realization. The process Krishna recommends is called Buddhi Yoga. The very first process, Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi Yoga did not exist before Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the founder and coined the term Buddhi Yoga. Only after Krishna speaks of something called Buddhi Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita does it then become part of Vedic and spiritual literature and teachings thereafter, right? So this is the first process Krishna recommends to Arjuna for achieving Atmagyan, realization of the spirit being separate from the body, Buddhi Yoga. This comes in chapter 2, text 39. Krishna, being the founder of Buddhi Yoga, defines it. He defines it early in the second chapter, but he defines it more clearly and definitively in the 10th chapter, when he describes the individual who engages in Buddhi Yoga, and Krishna uses the word bhajata. This comes in the 10th chapter, verses 10 and 11. So chapters 10, verses 10 and 11, Krishna defines Buddhi Yoga as the individual, as the yogi who engages in bhajata, who engages in loving relationship with the Supreme, relationship with the Supreme. This is the definition of Buddhi Yoga, right? Now, in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, and this is where the claim is not the claim, the accurate representation that Krishna gives all kinds of recommends all kinds of processes. Absolutely. This happens between chapters 2 and 6. So between chapters 2 and 6, Krishna recommends Jnana Yoga. There's 2 chapters on Karma Yoga. Krishna acknowledges Jnana Yoga or Shanga Yoga. Krishna describes Sannyasa Yoga. And if you recall, Arjuna was very confused about Sannyasa Yoga, right? There's a difference between Karma Sannyasa Yoga and Manasa Sannyasa Yoga, right? Karma, work. Karma Sannyasa Yoga means giving up work, going to the forest, standing on your head, and so on. Krishna talks about that, but even in Sannyasa Yoga, Krishna recommended Manasa Sannyasa Yoga. That means giving up, Manasa means of the mind, means giving up attachment to activities. That's what Krishna recommends renouncing, the attachments. But Krishna recommends all types of processes, all types of meditation practices, all types of yajna practices. This happens between chapters 2 and 6. Krishna doesn't even bring up the word bhakti until chapter 7. He mentions Buddhi Yoga, right? He does mention Buddhi Yoga, and he calls Buddhi Yoga as working with intelligence or living with intelligence or understanding. Buddhi means intelligence. But it is not until the 7th chapter, chapter 7, where Krishna uses and mentions the word bhakti. Interestingly enough, and we're talking about the recommendation, right? Krishna's final and preeminent recommendation in the Gita. At the end of the 6th chapter, Krishna says he's talking about karma yoga. He recommends it. He talks about jnana yoga. He recommends it. He talks about dhyana or ashtanga yoga. Certainly recommends it. And then he mentions uh, the yoga. He references buddhi yoga. And he says, of all types of yogas, buddhi yoga is what he recommends as the highest yoga. And when highest is the word Krishna uses, yuktatama, is the word that is the recommendation he has of all the yogas, right? That's the very last verse of the 6th chapter. And that's when he then goes into the 7th chapter and mentions bhakti for the first time. Now, from chapter 7 through 12, Krishna is talking all about bhakti yoga. The words bhakti yoga come up numerous times. Bhajata, loving, worship, comes up numerous times, all through chapter 7 through 12. In 13, Krishna then goes back to describing prakriti, which means material nature, and how one can be a bhakti yogi while navigating this material world. Finally, in the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the very last instruction in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 66, Krishna says, Sarva dharmam parityajya mam ekam sharanam. The final instruction Krishna gives to Bhagavad Gita is bhajata, to engage in loving service, loving relationship with me. So we go through all this just so that when you are teaching the Bhagavad Gita, if you want to put it in, what do they call it, the elevator speech? Yes, Krishna recommends all types of yoga processes. First of all, the Bhagavad Gita is founded on the principle of reincarnation. There's life after death. If you take away that concept, close the Bhagavad Gita, move on. Krishna recognizes that that is a claim that cannot be scientifically proven. Therefore, it must be realized. So there must be Atmagyan. There must be that self-realization of the spirit nature of the living entity. And he recommends all types of processes for doing so. Important processes. He genuinely recommends individuals engage in these various processes. And then he makes sure that we and Arjuna all understand that his personal recommendation is for one to engage in buddhi yoga or bhakti yoga while being engaged in this world. It's not that bhakti yoga, that's another unfortunate thing, is bhakti yoga is often sold, and I will use that term deliberately, sold in this world as kirtan or kind of Hollywood, Bollywood portrayal of sentimental love. That is not what Krishna is talking about. And a very cursory study of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is talking about bhakti yoga, it becomes very clear that bhakti yoga is a very, very disciplined process. And we see this particularly in this 12th chapter. The entire 12th chapter is about bhakti yoga in detailed teachings of bhakti yoga. It's not about singing and dancing. That's part of any process. But the bhakti yoga process is a very disciplined manner. It begins with manasa sannyasa yoga. It begins with dedicating and developing a relationship with the Supreme, your Ishta Devata, and dedicating your life and activities slowly, bit by bit, to your Ishta Devata. And from that comes realization, right? Which Krishna talks about in the 10th chapter. Okay, so that is a very key and important aspect of teaching Bhagavad Gita. Founded on reincarnation. You take away reincarnation, don't bother with the Bhagavad Gita. It's something that has to be realized. It cannot be scientifically proven. Krishna does not talk about it in scientific terms. He talks about it in logical terms so that we can begin to at least take the first step of acceptance but then we have to follow through the various processes Krishna recommends so that there is self-realization. All right, the second part I want to review today are the four manifestations. We're talking about bhakti, right? Four manifestations of love, of bhakti in our life. The manifestations come in adhyatma, means of the self. Adi bhuta means in manifestation in our relationships with other living entities. Adi daiva, which means manifestations with bhakti manifests in loving relationships with the world itself, nature, the world around us, and Adi Yagya. Bhakti manifests in our relationship with the Supreme. So Bhakti manifests on all four levels of our existence: Adhyatma, Adibhuta, Adidaiva, and Adiyagya. Sometimes it is unfortunately taught or assumed that Bhakti only manifests in relation with the Supreme. Not the case. And throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we see Krishna describes how the relationships and where these four levels of relation, how Bhakti Yoga can be manifested. In the video, I will, or in WhatsApp, I will, or in the video and in WhatsApp, I will share all of the references of the various verses where we get to see how Krishna talks about Buddhi Yoga. Krishna talks about the manifestations of bhakti in these four levels. Okay? Any questions or concepts, philosophical ideas you would like to review? It's going on 9:30 now.
Now, Haribol, I was just going to ask
Yes.
about this last point you made about the four ways of manifesting bhakti.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give more context on that? Like,
Okay.
how does it all connect?
Sure. Okay. Since Krishna is clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, he's recommending bhakti/buddhi yoga. It's very important that we understand why. Why is Krishna recommending making such a point about bhakti yoga when he spends pretty much 6 chapters, the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, talking about bhakti yoga in so many different ways? It's important that we recognize that bhakti is not simply in relation to the Supreme. Because when we see bhakti yoga as only in relation to the Supreme, we actually negate the very nature of the Supreme himself, right? If we just, I once had, it was quite a few years ago, I had a personal realization, and I said it to a friend. I said, it's the easiest thing in the world. It was at the time when I was going through my divorce. I was saying it's the easiest thing in the world to love Krishna. What's difficult is loving the people around, is loving the people around us, right? And I was saying it as a joke to my friend, but the realization was really, it was profound for me at the time. It was some decades ago. I was quite young and still going through my own personal and spiritual development. Because I had always, my spiritual practice and my practice in bhakti yoga, the yoga was all about having a wonderful, spiritual, loving relationship with the Supreme. Not recognizing, not being guided in a way and understanding that as bhakti manifests within me, genuine bhakti manifests within me, it's going to manifest in my relationship with myself. It's going to improve my relationship with myself, with others, and with the world around me. And when I came to that realization and I began to read Bhagavad Gita and various other scriptures, it became clear to see that other bhakti yogis throughout history also developed, their relationships with everyone around them also improved as they became more and more mature in their bhakti yoga process. Now, let's go to, let me just pull this up right now. In chapter 15, text 7, we'll go to each one of these four manifestations. In chapter 15, text 7, if I remember the verse correctly, Krishna says, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include mind. There, Krishna is describing the reality of the living entity, right? First of all, we are parts. Mamai Vangsha Jiva Loke. The Jiva, the living entities, are parts of the Supreme. When we recognize, at least accept, before there's realization, of course, there's intellectual acceptance. If we can at least accept in our initial development that we are parts of the Supreme, it begins to put into perspective the nature of our existence. That's the first, almost essential acceptance we have to make. We are parts of the Supreme. Next to that is that we are struggling in material nature. We're struggling with the six senses, which include the mind. We're struggling with this material body. That struggle is not simply to say, yes, oh, we're struggling, we're working very hard, we're trying to succeed in this world of prakriti, this world of material nature. But it behooves us to ask, why are we struggling? What are we struggling with? When we see the living entity, when we address this adhyatma, the nature of the self, not just our spiritual self, we are parts of the Supreme, but also our material self, we're struggling with the six senses and the mind, then it enables us to see our reality in a complete and holistic way, rather than just seeing our reality as we're spirit souls, and we should connect with the Supreme spiritually. Yes, we're spirit souls, we should connect with the Supreme spiritually, but we're also struggling very hard with the six senses and our mind. Yet still, Krishna's recommendation is bhakti. So reviving that realization that we are connected with the Supreme, dealing with the struggling of the six senses with the mind, Krishna is still always recommending bhakti. Let's go to Adibhuta, the living entity. Krishna talks about this in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Just pull it up so I can actually read it and not miss out any of. In the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, this is when Krishna is talking about the yogi. One is a perfect yogi who, by comparison, very important, by comparison to their own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. The yogi does not negate the reality of other living entities. The yogi does not negate the reality of other living entities. The yogi, the perfect Krishna, this is Krishna's own word, the perfect yogi sees not only their reality, but equality. The yogi sees them as equal with their own selves. So in seeing this equality and recognizing the reality of all other living creatures, Krishna is still recommending bhakti in order for this to be perceived and understood and realized. And I'm simply picking verses, selecting verses that clearly and almost exclusively talk about these four levels of manifestations. Once we're able to see and recognize these four levels that bhakti can be manifest, and we read the Bhagavad Gita, you read a chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you see it popping up all over the place, right? When Krishna's talking about how our spiritual realization manifests in our relationship with ourselves and understanding ourselves, how it manifests, bhakti manifests in our relationship with the living entities. Let's go and how it manifests in the world around us. This happens relatively early on in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It's one of my favorite verses that signify this. Verses 10 and 11. Let's read the translation. Krishna says, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. Text 11, Krishna says, the demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you, and thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity, men being humanity, between humanity and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. Krishna is saying there is no negation of our physical reality. We live in a world governed by Prakriti. There is a manner through which we can exist in this world, in our material reality, still through bhakti yoga. Right? Krishna says yajna, by the practice of yajna, this cooperation, this existence in Prakriti will bring liberation and prosperity. There's the spiritual result and a tangible physical result in this world by yajna. And what does Krishna say? The topmost yajna, Krishna mentions in the 10th chapter, the topmost yajna is japa yajna. Right? Japa yajna means reciting the mantras in relation with the Supreme. That's what japa is. Develop that relationship with the Supreme through the chanting of mantras. This is also where there's the misunderstanding, or let's say misunderstanding. There is the superficial assumption that all you have to do is bhakti yoga is simply about singing. Yes, japa yajna is the topmost yajna, which Krishna recommends, but it has to be followed up with the realization that bhakti is manifest on these four levels, will be manifest on these four levels. Rather than running away from our personal reality, rather than running away from our relationship reality with other people, relationship reality with the world around us, no, bhakti will manifest on all four levels. And finally, and this is the easiest, is how bhakti manifests in our relationship with the Supreme. For that, we'll go to, that's all throughout the Bhagavad Gita, but there's a really nice verse in chapter 9. Forgive me. Krishna says, check text 29, I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion, and this is where the word bhajate comes up and bhakti comes up, whoever renders service unto me in devotion is in me, and I am also a friend to them. This is bhakti manifesting our relationship with the Supreme. So everything that Krishna recommends in terms of, for Arjuna, Arjuna is going through this difficulty. Krishna recommends, first of all, you have to. It's interesting to note that Arjuna gives so many reasons, social, personal, selfish, karmic reasons why he should not go to battle. Krishna essentially countered all those arguments within the first, I would say, 30 verses, 40 verses of the second chapter. All of the arguments that Arjuna gave about not going to war, gave for not going to war. Krishna defeated and countered all those arguments by the 39th, 36th verse of the second chapter. Done with. Krishna then immediately begins to launch into what it means to have self-realization. Krishna says, you want to make this decision, fine, but do so from a place of self-realization. Know who you are, know your relationship with yourself, with the world, with other living entities, and with the Supreme. Then, and that was Krishna's final instruction in the Bhagavad Gita, do what you wish to do. Then make your choice. Make your choice from a place of self-realization. That's what Krishna's ultimate teaching is in the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever decision you make it from a place of self-realization. In order to achieve that self-realization, there are numerous processes. They all work together, by the way. These different processes, karma yoga, jnana yoga, sometimes it's taught that jnana yoga is for people who are intellectual. Not true. Karma yoga is for people who want to work. Not true. These yoga processes are all complementary and they work simultaneously, right? They just work on different aspects of our conditioning. That's all. They simply work on different aspects of our conditioning, but they all are to be tied together by Krishna's recommendation. They're to be tied together through bhakti. Once we have that self-realization through bhakti, bhakti manifests in a relation with ourselves, self-understanding, self-awareness, self-love, call it what you will, self-realization. It manifests in a relationship with all of the people around us, our family, spouses, work, everywhere. It manifests in how we see the world and other living entities, and it manifests, obviously, in our relationship with the Supreme. Then, from that point, making decisions is for the benefit, obviously, the ultimate benefit of ourselves and everyone around us. In other words, the ultimate benefit being freedom, moksha. Anything else we can go over? Okay, we'll leave it right there. So the format, just a reminder, the format for the tests, I will send the tests over the next couple of days, two tests. Those tests will be based on primarily, not only, but primarily on today's class and last week's class, with a few other questions sprinkled in, which you can find and get information with either by contacting me directly through WhatsApp or by watching other videos. Then there are the two lectures, which you should prepare for, and let me know when you're able to give them on a Sunday morning here in this format here. Remember, they won't be recorded and pasted across the internet. It'll just be just for us. Two lectures, one lecture on the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, and one lecture specifically on Swadharma. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Have a wonderful weekend, and we shall stay in touch. Hari Hari.